The auction block stood in the center of redemption, a town that had long forgotten the meaning of its name. Beneath the merciless sun, Maria Santiago, the sacred virgin, trembled as the auctioneer called for bids. For years the settlers had prayed to her for rain, for crops, for children. Now they would buy her like cattle. The crowd fell silent as a figure emerged from the shadows. Kózhį, the Apache outsider, placed a single silver coin on the block. His eyes, dark as night yet bright with purpose, met hers. The townspeople sneered at this savage who dared to claim their blessed virgin. But what would happen when these two worlds collided? Would their union bring destruction or healing to a land divided by hatred and fear? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maria Santiago had not always been for sale. There was a time when the people of redemption looked upon her with reverence rather than greed. She was only 12 when the drought came. 3 years of parched earth had left the settlement desperate, livestock dying in the fields and children crying from hunger. On that fateful Sunday, as the congregation prayed fervently for salvation, young Maria had walked to the center of the church, knelt before the altar, and begun to pray in a voice that seemed to echo from somewhere beyond herself. It was like listening to water, her mother would later say. That night, the skies opened. Rain fell for 3 days straight, soaking the cracked earth and filling the dried-up wells. The Santiago family's modest adobe home became a place of pilgrimage overnight. Maria fingered the tattered edges of her prayer shawl as Kózhį led her away from town. The delicate embroidery had once been vibrant with color, a gift from the townspeople when they first called her the Sacred Virgin. Now it was as faded as their loyalty. Her father had been a proud man, descended from the first Spanish settlers who claimed this territory. Francisco Santiago had worked the land with dignity, teaching Maria to recognize the rhythms of nature and the importance of honor. But honor couldn't fight the fever that took him 5 winters ago. A family needs a man, the whispers began after her father's death. Her mother, Elena, had stood tall against the judgment, working their small farm with Maria at her side. For a while they managed, then came the new drought, and with it, Abraham Thornton. The land needs the Sacred Virgin's blessing, Thornton had said, his smile never reaching his eyes as he offered loans to tide them over. Just small ceremonies on your property, for the good of all. The ceremonies grew more elaborate, with Thornton charging admission to those who came to witness Maria's prayers. Some days she would stand for hours under the desert sun, reciting the words they put in her mouth, wondering if anyone noticed that sometimes the rain came and sometimes it didn't. When her mother fell ill, the debt was already insurmountable. Thornton's ledger showed figures that made Elena weep. "We have nothing left to give," she had told him. "You have her," Thornton replied, eyes flicking to Maria. Her mother died with shame in her heart, whispering apologies until her final breath. Maria had packed the prayer shawl among her meager possessions that morning, a reminder of what faith had cost her. Now, as she followed this silent Apache man into the desert, she clutched the shawl to her chest. She no longer believed in her power to summon rain, but she believed in the weight of that silver coin, the only thing standing between her and whatever fate Thornton had planned. The distant howl of a coyote echoed across the darkening landscape. Maria shivered, not from fear of the wild, but from the strange sense that she was finally heading toward something true. "Will you kill me?" she asked Kózhį in halting Spanish, the first words she had spoken since the auction. He turned to her, his expression unreadable in the twilight. "No," he said simply. Then, after a pause, "I have seen you pray, not for them, for yourself." Maria stared at him, wondering how this man, this outsider whom the town treated worse than a stray dog, had seen what no one else had. Her private prayers, the ones that came from her heart rather than performance. "Where are you taking me?" she asked. "Away," he answered, "from lies." Maria nodded, clutching her prayer shawl tighter. She didn't know if she was walking toward freedom or another kind of bondage, but anything was better than being sold like cattle in the town square of redemption. Kózhì walked with the measured pace of a man who had learned that haste often led to error. His hand occasionally drifted to the broken tribal amulet hanging from a leather cord around his neck, half of a ceremonial stone pendant, its jagged edge a constant reminder of what had been severed. 5 summers had passed since the Council of Elders had broken the amulet in two, keeping half to signify his banishment from the people. 5 summers of solitude, of living between worlds belonging to neither. He who walks alone, they had named him, though he had once been Haske, warrior who brings wisdom. The irony was not lost on him. His wisdom had failed them all. It had been his idea to negotiate with the white settlers when their numbers grew too great to fight. "We can share the land," he had told the tribal council. "As we have shared with other tribes before." Some had opposed him, calling for war, but the elders had seen the wisdom in avoiding bloodshed. So Kózhì had gone to redemption with a small delegation, carrying sacred tokens and speaking words of peace. The meeting seemed promising until the arrival of a man named Thornton, whose eyes reflected nothing but calculation. The ambush came at dusk. 3 of the Apache delegation slaughtered by hidden gunmen. Kózhì alone escaped with a bullet wound in his shoulder and the weight of his people's deaths on his conscience. When he returned with the bitter news, the council could not decide if he had been foolish or treacherous. Either way, the result was the same, exile until he could prove his worth again. "Your heart sought peace," the eldest grandmother had whispered as she broke his amulet, "but your eyes were blind to danger. Find your vision in solitude, Kózhì, return only when you see truly." The years of exile had changed him. Living in hidden canyons, he had learned the deepest secrets of the desert, which plants healed, which brought visions, how to find water where others saw only dust. He had discovered the sacred spring that flowed even in the worst drought, its waters carrying minerals that closed wounds and eased pain. But it was the girl, the one they called the Sacred Virgin, who had awakened something long dormant within him. He had first seen her 3 winters ago, standing before a crowd of settlers, her eyes closed in prayer as they clamored for rain. He had watched from the shadows, recognizing immediately what the white people could not. Her connection to the earth was genuine, though buried beneath layers of their ritual and expectation. He had seen her again and again over the years, noting how the light in her eyes dimmed with each performance. Twice, he had followed her when she slipped away alone, watching as she knelt by a small stream, and prayed in whispers, tears streaming down her face. Those private prayers had brought gentle showers. The public ceremonies brought nothing but exhaustion to her face. So he had worked, odd jobs for traders who cared more for profit than prejudice. Tasks no settler would do, for pay that was always too little, each coin saved in a pouch, waiting. When he heard talk in town of the Santiago debts and what would happen to the girl, he knew the moment had come. The vision had been clear, a broken vessel made whole again, 2 halves becoming one. Now as they walked away from redemption, he felt the weight of her fear behind him. She did not trust him. Why should she? To her he was just another man claiming ownership. But Kózhì did not want to own the Sacred Virgin. He wanted to show Maria Santiago that her power belonged to no one but herself. His fingers traced the jagged edge of his broken amulet. Perhaps in helping her find freedom, he might find his own path home. Night settled over the desert like a blanket being drawn across the sky. Maria stumbled again on the uneven ground, her town shoes unsuited for the rocky terrain. They had been walking for hours, following no path she could discern. "How much farther?" she asked, her voice rough from thirst. Kózhį paused, turning to face her. Without a word, he reached into a leather pouch at his waist and withdrew a weathered piece of parchment. He mounted his horse and followed the nearly invisible trail, moving with the patience of a predator who knew his prey could not escape forever. By midday, he found the first sign, a small painted stone, partly buried in the sand. Hayes smiled grimly. He had hunted enough Apache to recognize tracking stones. The stone showed a water symbol with directional marks. He adjusted his course accordingly, unaware that the slight rotation of the stone meant the opposite of what he interpreted. "Clever," he muttered, "but not clever enough." As he rode on, Hayes failed to notice the crow, watching him from a twisted juniper tree, the same crow that took flight as soon as he passed, winging its way toward the hidden canyon, as if carrying news of the hunter's approach. The dawn hunt had taken Kózhì and Maria farther from the canyon than usual. Game had been scarce lately, forcing them to venture into new territory. Maria moved quietly beside him, having learned much in their weeks together. Her steps were nearly as silent as his own, her eyes constantly scanning the landscape as he had taught her. A rabbit darted across their path. Kózhì knocked an arrow, drew back his bowstring in one fluid motion, and released. The arrow found its mark with precision. As they approached the fallen rabbit, Kózhì suddenly froze. Maria had learned to trust his instincts and immediately dropped into a crouch beside him. "What is it?" she whispered. "Not alone," he replied, his voice barely audible. The warriors seemed to materialize from the landscape itself. 5 Apache men, with painted faces and weapons drawn, surrounding them in a tight circle. Maria's heart hammered in her chest, but she remained still, following Kózhì's example. One warrior stepped forward, his face marked with red lightning bolts. Kózhì's head, the name sounding like an accusation. "You walk forbidden lands." Kózhì stood slowly, hands visible. "Nastas," he acknowledged the warrior. "I hunt only to feed ourselves. We will leave. And bring the white-eyes sacred virgin with you." Nastas gestured toward Maria with his lance. "We have heard stories of her theft. Thornton's men speak to all tribes, offering reward." Before Kózhì could respond, the warriors parted to allow an elderly woman to enter the circle. Her face was deeply lined, her white hair in 2 long braids. She carried a small bundle, wrapped in buckskin and decorated with feathers and beads, a medicine bundle. "Silence, Nastas," she commanded. "I will speak with the exile and the rain-bringer." The warriors immediately lowered their weapons, though their eyes remained wary. The old woman approached Maria, studying her with sharp black eyes that missed nothing. "You are the one they call Sacred Virgin?" she asked in surprisingly good English. Maria nodded, uncertain how to respond. The elder opened her medicine bundle and removed a small pouch of herbs, which she sprinkled in a circle around herself, Maria, and Kózhì. The warriors stepped back, recognizing a ritual boundary. "I am Nalini, keeper of stories," the old woman said. "The spirits have spoken of you both." She turned to Kózhì. "You were Haske once, now you walk between worlds. I accepted my punishment." Kózhì replied, "I seek no return until I have earned it." Nalini nodded, then focused on Maria. "And you, daughter of settlers, have been both honored and used by your people." She reached out weathered hands. "May I?" Hesitantly, Maria extended her own hands. The elder took them, closing her eyes. For several moments, she was silent, her breathing deep and rhythmic. When she opened her eyes again, she looked troubled. "Your gift is true, but twisted by those who do not understand it," she said. "And now a shadow follows you both. A hunter," Kózhì confirmed, "sent by Thornton. Not just any hunter," Nalini warned. "He wears a necklace of thumb bones from our people." Maria felt sick at the image. "Because of me you're in danger," she said to Kózhì. "Mean days, the danger was always there," Kózhì replied, Hayes hunted me before you. The old woman touched the broken amulet at Kózhį's neck. You still seek balance for what happened at the Peace Council. It wasn't a question. Kózhĩ nodded once, his expression guarded. The path you walk now may lead to redemption or to greater loss, Nalini said. She returned the herbs to her medicine bundle and secured it. We cannot shelter you. The tribal council forbids it until your exile ends, but neither will we aid those who hunt you. Grandmother, Nastas protested, the settlers offer many goods, and what price do we pay for such goods? She cut him off sharply. Our honor? Our ways? No. She turned back to Kózhĩ and Maria. Go now. Hayes follows a false trail east, but he will discover his error by nightfall. As they prepared to leave, the old woman pressed the medicine bundle into Maria's hands. For protection, she said softly, and for the storm that comes. Maria looked at her questioningly. Not all storms bring rain, Nalini explained cryptically. Some bring change. They reached the canyon as dark clouds began to gather on the horizon. The air felt heavy, charged with an electricity that made the hairs on Maria's arms stand on end. Even the wildlife seemed to sense the coming tempest. Birds flew low, seeking shelter, and small creatures scurried into burrows and crevices. Big storm comes, Kózhĩ observed, securing the rabbit they had caught to a post outside his dwelling. Must prepare. They worked quickly, gathering firewood and bringing it inside, securing anything that might blow away, and reinforcing the shelter's outer walls with additional supports. As Maria helped, she felt a strange tingling in her fingertips, an odd buzzing in her head. I feel strange, she admitted, as they finished their preparations. Kózhĩ studied her face. The storm calls to you, he said simply. The first fat raindrops began to fall as they entered the dwelling. Within minutes, the gentle patter transformed into a deluge. Wind howled through the canyon, bending the cottonwoods almost to the ground. Lightning flashed with increasing frequency, followed by thunder that shook the very walls around them. Kózhĩ built up the fire, its warm light creating a haven against the storm's fury. But Maria could not settle. She paced the small space, drawn repeatedly to the doorway to gaze out at the tempest. I've never felt like this before, she said, her voice barely audible above the storm. It's like the rain is calling my name. Kózhĩ nodded, unsurprised. Old ones say those with true gift hear storm's voice. What does it tell you? Maria closed her eyes, listening not with her ears but with something deeper. It speaks of renewal, cleansing. Her eyes flew open, and danger. Just as she spoke, a tremendous crack split the air. They rushed to the doorway to see a massive lightning bolt strike a tall pine near their shelter. The tree burst into flames despite the rain, illuminating the canyon in an eerie flickering light. We must move, Kózhĩ said urgently, gathering essential supplies. Tree may fall on dwelling. They dashed outside into the downpour. The wind nearly knocked Maria off her feet as they made their way toward a cave, deeper in the canyon. Halfway there, a deafening crack announced the tree's fall, directly onto the side of their shelter. Sparks and flaming debris scattered in the wind. In the chaos, Maria lost her footing on the slick ground and stumbled toward the rushing stream, swollen with rainwater. Kózhĩ lunged for her, catching her arm just before she was swept away. The force of his movement brought them close together, her body pressed against his as he steadied them both. For a moment, they remained locked in that position, rain streaming down their faces, hearts pounding from the near disaster. Maria found herself suddenly aware of his proximity, of the strength in the arms that held her. Kózhĩ stepped back first, guiding her toward the cave with a hand at the small of her back. The cave provided shelter from the worst of the storm, though water still dripped from the entrance. Using the supplies he had grabbed and materials found in the cave, Kózhĩ managed to start a small fire. As they huddled near its warmth, Maria found herself trembling, not from cold or fear, but from the lingering sensation of the storm's energy coursing through her. "He owns most of it," Elena replied bitterly. "More so since the drought returned, buys failing farms for pennies. Some say," she lowered her voice, "he benefits more from drought than rain." As Elena moved on, Kózhį appeared at Maria's side. "Heard enough?" She nodded, something hardening within her. "Thornton uses the drought just as he used me. The town suffers while he profits. Now we know enemy's strength," Kózhį said, "and weakness." As they prepared to leave town, a commotion near the sheriff's office caught their attention. Ezekiel Hayes was dismounting, speaking intently to the lawman. "Hayes returned to town," Kózhį whispered, pulling Maria into the shadow of a building. "Must have lost our trail, seeks new information. What do we do now?" Kózhĩ's eyes gleamed with a warrior's calculation. "Now we set trap of our own." Night had fallen over Redemption, the festival lanterns illuminating the main street, while leaving the side alleys in convenient darkness. Maria and Kózhĩ moved silently toward Thornton's office, a two-story building that housed both his business operations and personal quarters. "There," Kózhĩ whispered, pointing to a window on the ground floor. "Light still burns." They watched as a clerk exited, locking the door behind him. After he disappeared down the street, Kózhĩ led Maria to the rear of the building, where a smaller window was partially open. "Wait here," he instructed. "Watch for anyone coming." With remarkable agility, he scaled the wall and slipped through the window. Moments later, the back door opened from within, and he beckoned her inside. The office was opulent compared to most buildings in Redemption. Persian carpets, leather-bound ledgers, and a large oak desk dominated the main room. Oil lamps burned low, casting long shadows across the walls. "What are we looking for?" Maria whispered. "Proof," Kózhĩ replied, already scanning the bookshelves. "Of Thornton's true business." They worked methodically, careful not to disturb anything in a way that would betray their presence. In a locked cabinet that Kózhĩ skillfully opened with his knife, Maria found what they sought: a leather-bound ledger marked Santiago account. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were detailed records of her family's debts, but the numbers didn't match her memory. Where her mother had spoken of owing hundreds, the ledger showed thousands. Interest had been compounded at impossible rates, additional fees added for non-existent services. "This can't be right," she murmured. "We could never have paid this. Not meant to be paid." Kózhĩ said grimly. "Meant to own you." Further investigation revealed more ledgers with similar patterns, other families who had fallen into Thornton's debt trap. But most disturbing was a correspondence file labeled Territorial Expansion. Inside were letters between Thornton and government officials discussing the Apache problem and plans for removing tribes from lands rich in minerals and water rights. One letter specifically mentioned the failed peace council that had led to Kózhĩ's exile. "Ambush was planned from beginning," Kózhĩ said, his voice tight with controlled anger as he read the damning evidence. "Thornton never intended peace." A detailed map showed lands targeted for development, including the sacred canyon where they had been hiding. Notes in the margin indicated the presence of silver deposits and the strategic value of the hidden spring. "He wants the canyon," Maria realized. "The water, the minerals, that's why he sent Hayes after us." "Not just for you," Kózhĩ agreed. "For land itself." They found a final chilling document, a contract with Hayes that specified payment, not just for returning Maria and eliminating Kózhĩ, but for mapping all water sources and mineral indications in the renegade's territory. A sound from outside, voices approaching, cut their investigation short. Quickly gathering the most damning evidence, they slipped out the back door seconds before the front door opened. Hidden in the shadow of a nearby building, They watched as Thornton himself entered his office, accompanied by the sheriff and Ezekiel Hayes. They worked together, Maria whispered. The law is on his side. Law is on side of who controls it. Kózhį corrected. But truth has own power. They made their way to the abandoned stable, where they had arranged to spend the night. By lantern light, they examined their stolen evidence more carefully. These ledgers show Thornton has been falsifying debts for years, Maria said, anger building as she reviewed the documents. He's stolen land from at least 12 families through these schemes, and this, she pointed to the territorial correspondence, proves he deliberately sabotaged the peace talks to justify taking Apache lands. Question is how to use this proof. Kózhį said, sheriff works for Thornton. Territorial judge visits only twice yearly. Maria studied the festival notice they had seen posted around town. Tomorrow is the last day of the festival. Everyone will gather in the square for the rain blessing ceremony. A bitter smile crossed her face. They're still performing it, even without their sacred virgin. Perfect time to show truth. Kózhį agreed. Many witnesses. Even Hayes cannot shoot us before people see evidence. Maria's fingers traced the falsified numbers in her family's debt ledger. Years of manipulation and exploitation, laid bare in black ink. My father always said truth is like water. It finds a way through any barrier. Kózhį nodded, his expression softening as he looked at her. Your father was wise man. He would have liked you, Maria said softly. He respected men who stood by their principles. In the dim light of the stable, surrounded by evidence of corruption and greed, they began to plan how they would bring Thornton's schemes into the light of day, and what it might cost them both. The final day of the festival dawned bright and mercilessly hot, the continuing drought evident in the dusty streets and wilting decorations. By mid-morning, the town square was filled with people, settlers from outlying farms, traders from distant territories, and even a small delegation of Apache who had come to trade during the temporary truce of the festival. At the center of the square stood a silver water basin on a pedestal, ceremonially filled each year for the rain blessing. The basin gleamed in the harsh sunlight, its ornate engravings depicting clouds, lightning, and falling rain, symbols of the prosperity that had abandoned redemption. Maria watched from the shadows of an alley as Abraham Thornton arrived, dressed in his finest suit despite the heat. He moved through the crowd like a man who owned not just the land but the people themselves, nodding condescendingly to those who greeted him. Ready? Kózhì asked softly from beside her. She touched the stolen ledger hidden beneath her shawl. Yes, they had separated the evidence, each carrying part to ensure that even if one was captured, some truth would reach the public. They had also positioned the rest of their proof where Elena Vasquez would find it if they failed. The town's makeshift band began playing, signaling the start of the ceremony. The mayor, a man firmly in Thornton's pocket, stepped up to the platform beside the silver basin. Friends and neighbors, he began, we gather again to pray for relief from this terrible drought. Though our blessed sacred Virgin is no longer with us, here he cast a pointed look at Thornton, who nodded gravely. We must still perform the ritual and hope for mercy from above. As the mayor droned on, Maria scanned the crowd, noting Hayes positioned near the front, his eyes constantly sweeping the gathering. The sheriff stood near Thornton, hand resting on his holstered pistol. Now, Kózhì whispered, as the mayor invited Thornton to approach the basin as the town's most prominent citizen. Maria stepped out of the shadows, moving purposefully toward the platform. Kózhì took a different route, circling to approach from the opposite side. They had timed it carefully to reach the platform simultaneously. She felt the exact moment she was recognized, a gasp from someone in the crowd, then another, a ripple of shock spreading outward as people realized the sacred Virgin had returned. It's her, Maria Santiago. The Virgin has returned. Thornton's head snapped up, his face draining of color as he saw her approaching. His shock doubled when he spotted Kózhį converging from the other direction. "Seize them," he shouted to the sheriff. "That savage has bewitched her." "We come with purpose," Nalini announced, when they reached the porch. From a pouch at her waist, she withdrew a flat, round stone with 2 paths carved into its surface. 2 paths stone. For when difficult choice must be made. The mayor cleared his throat. "The town council has discussed your situation at length. We acknowledge the injustices you suffered, Maria. We'd like to make amends by offering you back your family's land, free of debt." "And the tribal council," one of the warriors added, addressing Kózhį, "restores your name, Hasko. Your place among the people awaits." Elena stepped forward, her expression concerned. "But what of your life together, after what you've shared?" The question hung in the air, giving voice to what neither Maria nor Kózhį had fully addressed. Their journey had forged a bond deeper than either had anticipated. Nalini placed the 2 paths stone on a small table between them. "This stone helps when heart is divided." One path she traced the left carving, means return to what was. Other paths, her finger followed the right carving, means journey to what could be. "Must we choose immediately?" Maria asked, studying the stone's weathered surface. "Take until sunset," the elder advised. "But choose with one heart, or both paths bring sorrow." The delegation withdrew, leaving them alone with the stone and their thoughts. "I don't want to return to being the sacred virgin," Maria admitted once they were alone. "Even with better treatment, it would still be a cage. And I have changed too much for old tribal life." Kózhį replied, "See world differently now." They fell silent again, both contemplating alternatives neither had voiced yet. As the afternoon lengthened toward sunset, Kózhį finally spoke the words that had been forming between them. "There is third path," he said, "the canyon, not as exile, not as fugitives, as something new." Maria's heart quickened. "A place between worlds, place that bridges worlds," he corrected. "Open to both Apache and settler who seek peace, teaching true connection to land, to water, a sanctuary," Maria elaborated, the vision expanding in her mind, "where both traditions are honored, where children could learn from both." Kózhį nodded, his expression lightening. "Sacred spring has water enough. Land can support small community. But would either side accept such a place?" Maria wondered. "There's so much distrust." Rain ceremony showed possibility. Kózhį reminded her. "And after Thornton's schemes exposed, many question old ways of thinking." As sunset approached, they called the delegation to return. The 2 paths stone sat between them, untouched, since it had been placed there. "Have you chosen?" Nalini asked. Maria and Kózhį exchanged a glance, then together placed their hands on the stone, covering both paths simultaneously. "We choose a third path," Maria announced, "neither returning to the past nor separating our futures." Kózhį explained their vision for the canyon, a place of healing and learning, where both cultures could meet in peace. A settlement founded on mutual respect, rather than dominance or separation. "Impossible," the mayor protested. "The territorial authorities would never. After what we've learned of Thornton's corruption, they might." Elena interrupted, "especially with both communities supporting it." Nalini studied them with wise eyes. "The hardest path," she observed, "yet perhaps the truest." She took back the 2 paths stone and, unexpectedly, turned it over. On its reverse was carved a spiral. "When neither path serves, find the center. From center, new paths emerge." 1 year later, the hidden canyon had transformed. No longer the refuge of a solitary exile, it now hosted a small but thriving settlement. At its center stood a new dwelling, larger than Kózhį's original shelter, built with a seamless blend of Apache techniques and settler materials. Its walls of stone, timber, and adobe rose organically from the canyon floor, while its roof incorporated both Apache waterproofing methods and settler shingles. Maria stood in the doorway of this blended home, watching children playing near the sacred spring, some Apache, some settler, all laughing together as they learned to craft simple rain sticks under Elena Vasquez's supervision. The old woman had been among the first to join their experiment, bringing her knowledge of herbs and cooking that complemented the Apache traditions Kózhį shared. They learned quickly, observed a deep voice beside her. Maria turned to find Ezekiel Hayes, his weathered face softer than it had been a year ago. After Thornton's conviction and hanging, Hayes had surprised everyone by offering his services to the new settlement. "I know every trail in this territory," he had said gruffly. "Might as well use that knowledge for something better than hunting men." Now he served as liaison between the canyon community and distant towns, bringing supplies and carrying messages, his fearsome reputation providing a shield of protection for the fledgling settlement. "The spring ceremony begins soon," Maria reminded him. "Will you join us this time?" Hayes shifted uncomfortably. "Still not one for rituals," he demurred. "But I'll watch." She smiled, understanding his lingering unease with Apache traditions after decades of conflict. Such deep wounds healed slowly, but they were healing. Beyond the spring, Kózhį emerged from the trees, leading a small hunting party, returning with deer and rabbits for the feast. Though officially restored to his birth name, Hasko, many still called him by the name he had carried in exile, now a badge of honor rather than shame. He caught Maria's eye across the canyon and raised a hand in greeting, his normally reserved expression warming. They had been married in both traditions during the winter solstice, an Apache ceremony, followed by vows spoken before a traveling preacher, symbolizing their commitment to honoring both paths. As sunset approached, the canyon's residents gathered around the sacred spring. The tribal elder Na Lini, now a frequent visitor, stood opposite the preacher from Redemption. Between them was the lightning-struck tree that had survived last year's storm. Kózhį, he had carefully carved it into a totem that incorporated symbols from both cultures, a physical representation of their shared vision. Maria took her place beside Kózhį, their hands joined as they had been during that first rain ceremony in Redemption. Together they led the gathering in a blessing that drew from multiple traditions yet belonged solely to neither. "The land sustains us all," Maria began. "The water remembers our care," Kózhį continued. "And together we find strength," they concluded in unison. As they spoke, clouds gathered above the canyon, not storm clouds, but gentle bearers of life-giving moisture. The first drops fell as the ceremony reached its conclusion, a soft benediction upon the community they had built from unlikely beginnings. Later, as moonlight silvered the canyon walls and the celebration continued around the communal fire, Maria and Kózhį stood together beneath the carved lightning tree. Their unlikely journey, from auction block to sanctuary, had opened a path neither could have imagined alone. Sacred Virgin and Apache exile, Maria mused, leaning against his shoulder. "Who would have thought?" Kózhį smiled, his arm encircling her waist. "Not end of story," he said, his eyes on the diverse community gathered around the fire. "Beginning."